Welcome to The Issue on your TV. I'm Mark Carr, and you'll notice we're still broadcasting from our homes over Zoom. So everyone, my co-hosts, guests, and producer are all safe. My co-host this week is Mr. John Sawyer, retired CEO and president of the Oakville Chamber of Commerce. Hey, John, how are you and the family doing?
Life is good. Everything is good for us. It's nice that things are opening up a bit, so we're spending more time with our kids and grandkids. So that's been really good.
And are you finding with business getting back to business, it's better for you? I notice your hair is a little bit on the long side.
Yeah, Marianne likes it, so I may be stuck with this for a little bit, but I will eventually sneak off to a barber shop and get it fixed.
Okay, John, I'm going to turn it over to you to introduce our first guest.
Okay, thanks, Mark. I am so happy to have my friend Kyle Barber with us today. He has to be one of the busiest people in the country right now. So, Kyle, thank you for taking a few minutes to talk to us. As you know, I've wanted to have you as a guest for a long time on the program. So for those of you who don't know him, Kyle is the president and CEO of the YMCA of Oakville and of Niagara. He was appointed way back in 2013, which is I think when we first met, and you had always been a great partner with the chamber, and I always enjoyed working with you. So first question is for you personally. How are you and how are you coping?
Well, hasn't it been amazing? I was on a meeting this morning and somebody reminded me that this is week 16. And if you told me 16 weeks ago that I'd be doing an interview here in a vacant YMCA, at least by the pool, you know, I would have maybe had a bit better realization of exactly what we were moving into. This has been quite a change. The YMCA usually steps up during crisis, and you know, this is probably the first time we've had to step up by stepping back. You know, because of public, you know, the suppression of the pandemic. Our business is formulated on relationships, face to face, and high ratio scale. So. It's been really a strange, sort of eerie feeling as we've moved through this, John.
So, Kyle, with the YMCA, your revenue streams are all affected greatly. How are you able to continue on under these circumstances?
Yeah, it's been really difficult for charities, and probably even more difficult for charities that have infrastructure. You know, we've had to lay off, you know, 550 staff. I think we've closed our 48 childcare centers. Camp, we had 7,000 camper weeks ready to go. It would have started today, in fact, and we had to send refunds to that. So it's been really difficult not having income streams. Of course, our government has put some subsidy in place that has helped us. But when we look at YMCAs across the country, you know, a lot of charities don't have significant reserves, and that's really what we've had to live on. And so, you know, we're pretty healthy here in Oakville, but some of the other YMCAs across the country have certainly been impacted and will continue to be. As we move out of this. We are hoping to start delivering some programming soon with childcare's essential childcare expansion, maybe some day camp programming. We're watching that really closely. But fitness, health, aquatics, you know, our gym and swim facilities are probably pushed to the back of the stove when it comes to reopening.
So any projection on when the programs will begin and what they're going to look like?
Well, we're watching pretty closely. You know, everything's being done in consultation with provincial government and public health. We will be able to start looking at sort of rolling start to childcare and maybe get some camp programming going as we move through July. Fitness, health, and aquatics will likely be phase 3, and so you know, for us right now, we're probably looking at September, October. You know, obviously it's the second wave that we're kind of worried about. We only want to open once, and you know, the other part of this is that getting back to even the other question about funding, the ratios are all askew when it comes to opening camps and childcare programming. And so it makes it non-affordable for parents. Childcare is already expensive. And so when you start tightening ratios and adding in PPE and all the other types of safety measures that we're gonna have to embark on, it really does test, you know, the expense side of the work. So we are working with the government. The YMCA is the largest provider of childcare locally and in Ontario and across Canada. So it's a local question. It's also a provincial question, but it's also a federal question as well. So those talks continue, and you know, we'll hopefully have some good news soon, because I'm tired of sort of this ready, aim, ready, aim, ready, aim, ready, aim. You know, we're used to firing.
Yeah.
Kyle, I understand that your revenue streams have literally dried up, but how about, can you talk about your successes with local partnerships and the Y network, regional, national, and in the US, those partnerships that are so important to not-for-profits?
Yeah, thanks very much. It's a really good question, because the Y is it's a huge international organization, and we've been, and because the pandemic is worldwide, we have a special network that we've been looking into. So you know, we watched some of the other countries and what some of the trends were there, and then we've been working pretty hard with US. Utilizing collaborative intelligence on, as they start reopening. We developed a plan for the Vancouver YMCA, which was the first YMCA to reopen in Canada. So I was involved in figuring out what that might look like. We developed a national real-time sort of playbook, and we keep updating that so that we can learn as we go. As far as the local partnerships go, we're talking to everybody here that's in the delivery business, the municipality especially, and the YMCA are looking to coordinate how we can work together to make sure our services get delivered. Because this isn't just charities, municipalities are hard hit, and of course, lots of businesses, small and large, have been hit pretty hard by this. It's really hard to see what the economy is going to bring us in the near future, and of course in the mid future.
So just to go back to your daycare comment earlier, Kyle, I'm hearing anecdotally from a lot of people, the biggest barrier to them getting back to work is they can't find daycare for their kids, so they're caught between a rock and a hard place. They can't get back to work until they find some daycare. So I hope that works out well for everyone, and we can get back to that quickly. Anyway, sorry, Mark, I think I might have stepped on you. Did you have a question?
Well, I was just interested in knowing, for all the members of the Y, when can they expect to get back to some degree of normality with the Y?
That's a great question. I'm uncertain at this time. I mean, we can look to the fall, and we do think that there'll be a semblance of life normality, perhaps as school gets back in, and as you know, some of these questions, childcare is needed to get the economy running, and so we need to get that going. As far as fitness, health, and aquatics goes, it's a little bit longer, because we've got to figure out how to, as long as we're trying to suppress and there's no vaccine, we got to make sure that there's safety. So we're really watching to see, is it safe for staff? Is it safe for users? Second of all, is there a market? Because our research would show right now that day one wouldn't have a ton of usage. You know, maybe
Oh.
the 90-day membership, you know, we'd be able to start getting 60, 70, 75% back, because we do work with a lot of seniors. And then I would say there has to be economic, because we don't have government funding. So it needs to make sense economically. So we're doing that. We're watching data. We're watching the other YMCA's, and hopefully we'll be able to make that call soon.
So people should stay in touch with you over the course of the summer and into the fall. And Kyle, I really appreciate you taking the time to be with John and I today and update the community on what's happening with the Y.
Yeah, well, hopefully we'll do it again, because it's ever changing, you know, and we'll be able to touch in again when we've got a little bit more specific news, hopefully.
Thanks, Kyle. I really, really appreciate it. And I think it definitely is a good idea to do a follow-up down the road. So I'll let you know once we're coming back in September. So maybe early in the fall or later in the fall, we can do a catch-up.
Yeah, it's a pleasure working with you again, John. And I'm sure you'll have your hair cut by then. You'll be a little more recognizable.
Thanks a lot, Kyle. Really appreciate you being with us today and updating the community. And we'll be right back here on The Issue. I'm Mark Carr. Welcome back to The Issue here on your TV. I'm Mark Carr, and joining me as a co-host is John Sawyer, retired president and CEO of the Oakville Chamber of Commerce. John, our next guest is a high-profile guest, and we're glad that she had the opportunity to join us. So I'll throw it to you so we can get all the questions in.
Thanks, Mark. I am very excited to have Anita Anand here, MP for Oakville and Federal Minister of Public Services and Procurement. I retired from the chamber just at the time Anita was elected, so we didn't have a lot of opportunity to work together. So this is our introduction to each other, and I'm just thrilled to have you, Anita. I know how busy you absolutely are, and thank you for squeezing us in. So my first question is, personally, how are you? How are you coping? You know, what's a typical day look like for you now?
Well, thank you to both Mark and John for having me on the show today. A typical day is essentially on the phone all day long, talking to my internal counterparts in the federal government, as well as external stakeholders, particularly in the area of procurement. This has been the situation since March 13th, when I think all of our lives changed and our country really buckled down for a time to respect social distancing rules. And it was a time also where we revolutionized procurement. We started to do procurement like it has never been done before. We focused on what Canada needs now and in the long term. And that has been my strategy as the Minister of Public Services and Procurement, to make sure that Canada and Canadian provinces and territories have exactly what frontline healthcare workers need now and in the case of a second wave. It's been incredibly exciting and rewarding to be able to serve Canada in this way, as well as to consider what the needs of our country are. And again, I'm extremely honored to be able to hold this position.
So just to follow through on your comments, as the Minister of Public Services and Procurement, you played a key role, a vital role in navigating through the initial stages of the pandemic. What was that like, and how are we positioned to deal with the second wave that many are predicting?
Well, thanks for that excellent question. I will say that even though it seems that our country is moving into another stage of addressing the pandemic in terms of economies opening up, from a procurement standpoint, our strategy has not changed. And that is that we need to buy aggressively in the domestic and international markets to make sure that the PPE needs are met. And this is a focus of mine now and into the future. We need to be prepared, and this is an all hands on deck moment. And so the work of procurement continues. It will not change in terms of making sure that Canadians have what they need. In a very important sense, the heartening story of this pandemic has been the way in which domestic enterprise has stepped up. The way in which Canadian companies are producing face shields, surgical masks, N95s, ventilators, hand sanitizer, and the like is all part of Canada's national response to this crisis. And I will say again, the level of cooperation across the country in terms of provinces and territories, right on down to domestic enterprises, small, medium, and large, has been unbelievable.
Anita, Dr. Tam has said originally that no masks were needed. Now she said yes to masks. And I'm wondering whether local businesses have been able to pivot to help provide those PPEs to the Canadian government, to Ontario, and to Oakville and Burlington.
Well, thanks for that excellent question. I will say that the science is continually evolving, and so the pivot on masks is part of a general changing response to what we see in front of us. In terms of the supply side and what's available for enterprises and organizations that are looking to stock up on PPE, what I did as minister was to establish something called the Supply Hub. That is a national internet-based platform in which anyone seeking to procure masks and other PPE can go to and can find out where they can procure PPE, including masks. And I also have a supply council comprised of leaders across the PPE and other sectors in this country. And what they are telling me is that on the supply side, in terms of the availability of masks, there are not the issues that we had way back in March and April, that there is supply of masks. And so that's very heartening. We have this internet-based platform where people can go and find PPE, and we also have businesses themselves telling us that they're able to get that PPE. So once again, it's something we're watching, but it's something that we feel we are continually addressing.
Anita, this is in the past, prior to the pandemic. I have been very personally disappointed in the level of political partisanship that's developed over the years. However, I have to say I am really pleased to see the level of cooperation between the federal and provincial governments over the past 3-4 months. And I'm wondering how we can ensure that that level of cooperation continues in the future.
Such an excellent question, and a point that I often make myself. I convene regularly my procurement counterparts across the provinces and territories for conversations about procurement. And I can tell you that this is not a partisan discussion. We talk about what individual jurisdictions need, and as a federal government, I promise them that I will assist them in getting the PPE that they need. So for example, in one of our conversations, Nunavut mentioned that they need swabs. We had swabs to Nunavut in 24 hours. That's the type of action that we seek to make in collaboration with our provinces and our territories. It is an all hands on deck effort. There is no time to be partisan when people's lives are at stake, and that has been my approach, and it appears to be the approach of my counterparts across the country.
Great. I really hope that that continues. Mark, I think you had a question.
And Anita, yeah, just following up on John's question, usually major budget impacts are introduced in the House of Commons to allow questions from the opposition. But the Prime Minister is making major announcements at press conferences outside his home. With a minority parliament, do you think this is what Canadians want to see?
Well, can I mention a very important point that we, as members of Parliament in the House of Commons, have been meeting since April 20th. And I, as a Minister of Public Services and Procurement, have been fielding questions every single day. So all ministers have been taking questions on their files since April 20th, and in a longer format than regular question period. So, for example, if somebody wanted to question me for 5 minutes straight, they're able to do that. And so the questions of ministers continued all through the spring. And we were also appearing at committee. So I appeared 2 or 3 times at committee to take even more questions from the opposition and other parties in the House. Our goal is to be there to answer questions, and that's exactly what I, as minister, and my colleagues aimed to do. In addition, we are convening 4 times over the summer, which is unprecedented. And as you know, on July 8th, the Minister of Finance will be presenting to the House of Commons a financial snapshot. So all in all, in addition to what the Prime Minister discusses in his daily presser, there is accountability of ministers in the House of Commons and at committee. So combined, that is another example, in my view, of a desire to be collaborative and to be transparent. Thanks.
I think that's important for people to know, that just because the questions aren't asked in the usual format, that these questions are being answered more substantially, probably, than if they were asked in the House of Commons. So I'm appreciative of knowing that that answer, and thank you.
Yes.
John?
Thanks, Mark. Anita, there have been a number of, and I appreciate these are anecdotal, but a number of anecdotal reports of fraud regarding some of the government programs. Any idea of the magnitude of the issue and any plans to deal with it?
Yes, no question. These are programs that are outside my role as Minister of Public Services and Procurement. I assume you're speaking about some of the other large-scale programs that are supports that we have been rolling out for students and for seniors and for small and large businesses, which have been, as your question suggests, very extensive, because our goal has been to support Canadians through this crisis so that when the economy is ready to get back up and running, the Canadians themselves are ready. But there's no question that our government is concerned about any time a person is seeking to undermine the system, undermine those supports, and those are issues that my colleagues have vowed to be on top of.
Yeah, I do have to say, I think the government acted quickly and did the right thing initially. It's just the follow-up would have to be massive to look at people who took advantage of the situation. There's been, and I recognize this is not particularly falls within your responsibility as a minister, but it has been a major concern about the impact of COVID in long-term care facilities. Any thoughts or comments you want to make regarding the future of long-term care facilities in Ontario and Canada?
Well, I'm so glad you raised that question, because it has been one of the most heartbreaking aspects of this crisis, and that is the extent to which the elderly have borne the brunt of COVID-19, and the extent to which long-term care facilities, and that of course can include so many different types of residences that the seniors live in, have had to struggle and really found difficult in this crisis. And this has got to be an issue for us to continue to focus on. We are not out of the woods. We may have a second wave, and we have to make sure that all segments of our population are protected. My own dad, who is 89 and in a senior's residence, was one of those who simply could not leave. And I think in addition to the physical health of our seniors, we also have to attend to their mental health. That on the one hand, we want to keep them safe, but on the other hand, they need to see their families and they need to be able to communicate with the outside world. And so I think these are the types of questions that we need to make sure we are discussing as a country and as between the federal and the provincial governments, who, of course, as you know, have the jurisdiction over healthcare, to continue to get on top of.
Thanks. Joey, our producer, is asking us to wrap up. We're out of time. I have a number of other things I'd like to talk to you about, and hopefully we could have you back in the future. I very much appreciate your very articulate responses to all our questions.
And Anita, I do want to thank you very much for making the time to come on the issue and updating the community on the goings on at the federal level. So thank you so much, and
Anytime, Mark.
stay safe.
You too. I can't wait till our next conversation. Take care.
The issue is going to take a break for the summer, and I'd like to thank my co-hosts this season, John Sawyer, who is with us today, Kim Slonwhite, Angelo Bentavania, Deb Timstra, and Rick Goldring. And of course, the issue couldn't go on the air without the dedication of our production team, led by producer Joey Riccatoni. We'll be back in the fall with interesting guests to keep the community updated on a variety of issues. On behalf of my co-hosts all, thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the fall here on your TV. Truly local. Stay healthy, everyone.